Hey, what's going on, guys? Ben Brewster here, TradeAthletics.com. I'm joined here today by Tyler Zombro, AAA pitcher for the Rays and Trade Athletics coach. Today I want to talk a little bit about the figure eight drill. Now, if you haven't seen the figure eight drill, if you don't know what that is, I'm going to link a video in the description below, kind of going into more depth on the figure eight drill. But it's a great drill to work on the fluidity of the arm action, being able to capture that momentum from handbrake, being able to get the arm up and on time and capture that entire loop of energy through the arm spiral. So it's a great drill for your arm action. But the problem is a lot of athletes kind of encounter certain flaws and certain issues when doing the drill. So I want to go over a few of those today and show kind of some quick tips, some quick fixes if you happen to have any of these issues when doing the figure eight drill. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the video. So one of the big flaws that you'll see is that you're not necessarily matching the right plane of the arm slot or the torso rotational plane that you're trying to create with the figure eight. So it's actually important how you draw that eight. Now it seems like kind of a minor detail, but if you're a guy who gets a little bit too rotational, and Zombro has a tendency at times to get really rotational on the back end where he really reaches back and kind of over rotates, then you want to be sure that as you're drawing that figure eight, you're not drawing a super horizontal figure eight, but you want to kind of imitate more of a normal eight versus like an infinity sign. So the simple tweak for Tyler was, instead of swinging that arm cross body and letting that momentum take him way back behind his body, all we did was kind of say, hey, let's adjust the actual angle of that figure eight so it became more of a straight up and down eight versus more of a horizontal. So all that looked like for him was changing the direction of that first eight so that the momentum of that takes him down and more in line with where he's trying to be with his rotational plane. The other issue that causes when you get too rotational is that his arm had a tendency to be late getting up. So if you kind of go through that in slow motion, what you used to do, he'd get very rotational on that eight, then he'd really counter rotate on the back end, and then as he began to rotate, his arm didn't actually have a chance to get up, and so he'd be throwing uphill, and his arm would also be late as he began to initiate torso rotation. So simply by altering the plane of that figure eight and drawing a figure eight that's more in line with the rotational plane he's trying to create, it gave his arm time to actually flip up, and it gave it the right plane to actually flip up behind his body, if that makes sense. So simply drawing a more vertical eight allows the arm to flip up and be on time. If you draw too horizontal of a figure eight, it makes you over rotational and doesn't allow the arm to be up as you begin to turn. So that's one of the most obvious tweaks that you can make if you're having trouble with the arm not being on plane, on time, and you're getting over rotational. Just adjust the angle of the eight that you're drawing to match the arm slot that you're trying to create. So again, maybe a super over the top guy, you're drawing an eight that's a lot more vertical. Maybe a 3/4 guy, you're drawing an eight that roughly corresponds to that arm slot. And then if you're a guy who's, he's closer to a sidearm guy, but he has a tendency to get way over rotational. So we still try to over exaggerate that initial figure eight swing just to get him a little bit more downhill, a little bit more on plane. So that's the first tip that I got for you guys on the figure eight drill. So the second issue is not intersecting that figure eight swing with your actual set position. So Tyler comes set right around chest level. So what you want to do is, as you kind of go through a figure eight, you want to make sure that the hand ultimately intersects with where he would normally be breaking the hands. So if you do one of these figure eights where the hand is completely bypassing where you'd actually be breaking the hands in a normal throw, then you're basically just reinforcing something that's going to be very difficult to transfer when you have to come set in that same point. So we want to make sure that as he goes through the figure eight and it begins to swing down, there's a point at which it intersects with where he would naturally be breaking the hands anyway. So having the figure eight not just be in plane, but intersect, he doesn't need to necessarily come to a pause, but being able to feel how that energy flow comes right back to where he would normally be breaking the hands anyway and continues to flow through it. That's going to be extremely useful for actually being able to transfer this feeling to when you have to start with the hands together. So that's tip number 2 for mastering the figure eight drill. So the third tip I have for you guys is to start slow and build speed. Now, if you just look perfect the first time you do this drill, you might just be able to start at full speed, but a lot of guys will have some sort of kind of arm timing issue when they're doing any sort of arm action drill. In Zombro's case, he has a tendency, his body really does want to be a little bit late with the arm as he begins to rotate. He wants to get uphill, and his arm also is kind of down. So in order to get that arm up and on time, starting slow and building speed is a good way to help his body understand, hey, I don't want to rotate my torso until the arm actually gets up. Now I can rotate and everything downhill on plane. So one of the sayings that I really like is from a coach, Dave Cogan. Go check him out, PFA. But he has a saying, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And I really like that cue for pitchers, especially as they're kind of learning to remap or make some minor adjustments or tweaks to their arm path, is, hey, let's give the arm a chance to actually get up in a good position before we accelerate. It doesn't mean that once you actually get to full intensity, max effort throwing, that we're going to have pauses and lags in the arm action. It just means that, hey, maybe the first set of your plyo drills, you're really kind of feeling out the actual positions, making sure the arm's on time. Now add speed, now add intensity, once you've made sure that you're actually passing through the right dynamic position. So that would be the third tip. The final cue for the figure 8 drills is start slow, let that arm actually get up and on time, and then accelerate. As you begin to master that, you might be able to kind of nix that from your routine, but as you're initially learning the drill, starting slow is a very underrated technique for being able to learn better patterns, better dynamic positions. It doesn't mean that you can't add intensity into the program. It doesn't mean intent's not important. It just means as you're kind of in that training wheel phase of learning a new skill, learning a new path, whatever it is, starting slow is a very useful tip to incorporate into that entire progression. So that's the third tip for the figure 8 drill.